Hi, everyone. My name is Jen, and I first want to say thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. I wish I could be there in person with you, but I've been traveling for business quite a bit. So Lisa was gracious enough to allow me to send a recording in, and I'd like to share a little bit of my story with you. So we'll take it way back to the beginning. I grew up in a household with a drug addicted alcoholic parent, and it made for a very tumultuous childhood. A lot of instability. However, I learned a lot through that process. I grew up probably a lot faster than I should have because I became the caretaker. I stepped in where that parent was absent, and it was not the easiest thing to do at such a young age, but it became part of who I am. I am known as the mother hen a lot of the time. I have always enjoyed taking care of people, and I've always been a bit of an overachiever. And I think those come as a result when you grow up in an environment like that. I have two younger sisters and pretty much took care of them from the time I was 11 when my folks split. Um, I became their caretaker as well. And it was both rewarding and um, hard. It was a hard time for the whole family, but I wouldn't take any of it back because it became part of who I am. I feel like I have found a strength um, that I didn't always have. I went from the home. I left home at 17 and started working full time at that time. I got my own apartment, became very independent um, because it was the first time that I was able to just take care of myself. Um, but I also was very vulnerable to certain people, certain types of people, and I ended up with the wrong crowd. And my first boyfriend was also um, drug addicted and alcoholic. He was also very physically and mentally abusive, which, when you grow up in a household like I did, you don't have a picture of what a healthy relationship looks like. So I ended up in a very unhealthy relationship from the time I was 17. I was with that first person for a couple years. And um, when that I did have the strength to leave that relationship um, and pretty much fell into the next one, right? And the next one was more mentally abusive than physically abusive, although he did get physical at times. He had a lot of psychological problems, so it wasn't just drugs or alcohol. At that point, it became something different, something that I um, didn't know to look for, and was with that person for a couple years. Um, when I left that situation, I went into my third and my final abusive relationship. And that was definitely the worst of the three. This time frame, by the time I got out of that one, I had been in abuse for 7 years. Um, it was very, that last relationship was very, very. He was not only doing he was selling drugs, and then he started doing the drugs that he was supposed to be selling, and then he started bringing weapons into the house. And when he brought the weapons into the house, I knew that my days were numbered. I don't know if you have experienced something like this before or grew up in a household like I did. I, from a very young age, had never thought I would make it past the age of 20. I had always thought that I wouldn't make it past that age, and that's a really sad thing for me to even share because I'm sure most people don't have those thoughts, from the time that they're little. But I did, and if I had not left that last relationship, I wouldn't have. Um, what happened was some of what transpired while I was in that last relationship. My parent, who had been on a very dark path, um, had an actual mental breakdown and had overdosed, had a mental breakdown, ended up in a mental facility, and I was the only family in the area, so I was the one picking up the pieces of the bills, that needed to be paid, and the communication that needed to happen, and the visits, and I started attending counseling. Um, in We started participating in adult children of alcoholics group, and I have to say that that's when I started to find my voice. And as a result of me going to that counseling with my parent, it allowed me to find enough strength to know that if I didn't get out of that relationship, I was going to die. And I didn't want to die at that point. I certainly had had my moments growing up. But at that point, one thing I can say through all of everything that I've been through, I've always kept a job, and I've always been an exemplary employee. I've always given everything 110%. And that was the one common consistency through my life is I always had a full-time job to fall back on. It was something that I always did and I always excelled at, my performance. And I'm very fortunate for that because I know a lot of people get into these situations. And even though I was totally isolated from my family for the bulk of those 7 years, when I had to become closer with the parent that was going through their own things, it brought me back into the family, and it certainly helped me through some of the things that I had to go through when I did leave. I I decided one day I went to work. I told my boss, I said, I have to get out of the situation. I had shown up for work with black eyes and, had been hospitalized several times. And so my boss knew that something was going on, but we never had that discussion. It was, embarrassing and shameful and not something that I wanted to talk about, and certainly not with my male employer. However, that day, it was shortly after we had been going to the counseling together, my parent and and I went to work and I said to my boss, I said, I've got to get out. And this, would you be willing to help me? And he said, I will absolutely, escort you to the apartment. It was my apartment, by the way, my apartment in my name. All of my things were there. Um, when I left that day, I took as much as we could carry. I will never forget this boss because, he literally grabbed a golf club from his office and escorted me to the apartment. We both carried as much as we could, and I left and I didn't go back. Um, I did have to work out, the lease, and I had to get him evicted, um, and all of the credit card debt that I was in was all things that he had charged on my card, and I had, nothing to show for it. I was $40,000 in debt at that time, which was another learning experience. I, had to figure out how to get myself out of the hole. I wasn't making a lot of money at that point. But I did connect with a credit counselor and they helped me through that part of it. I did connect with some great resources. I was living in California at the time, and there were all kinds of resources that I found that helped me through that stage of my life. They helped me get back on my feet. They helped me find, the credit counselor. They helped me get into group therapy myself for my own issues. And I have to say, even though that was so, so difficult, I'm so grateful. And I look at every day now and since then as a gift because this is a life that I never thought I was going to be able to live. So, what that looks like today is, I'm married and have been for many, many years. Um, it never, ever, ever thought that I would be married, have a healthy relationship with any man, but especially somebody as sweet as my husband. Um, I own a home. I own my own business. This is my second business. Um, I feel like um, a butterfly, right? I feel like I was in a cocoon for so many years in a very dark cocoon. And when I was finally able to break free from that cycle, because it was a cycle, the parent that went through as much as they did, it was something that their parents, had been through, and um, this parent had a very, very, very difficult child. And so through, many, many years of therapy, both on their side and my side, we were able to come to the realization that, everybody in these types of situations does the best that they can with the tools that they have. And sometimes we don't have all the tools that we need, you know, and we do the best that we can with what we have. And that's exactly what we did. Um, there comes a time where you have to let go of the shame and the embarrassment and the thoughts that put yourself in that situation and that you know, being as intelligent as you are, like made some really awful decisions, but you don't know what you don't know. And when you have never seen a healthy relationship, you don't know that there's anything better, out there. So it was a long learning process and a lot of time and a lot of therapy. And I found my strength, I found my voice, but it took a long time. I'd have to say that um, even in my mid 20s to late 20s, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know if I was capable of being a wife. I didn't know if I was capable of being a mother, and I chose not to be a mother. I had mothered my two sisters coming up, and that was a great experience. It was hard. It was all those things. I was super young. Um, but I feel like, they're sister kids to me. I'm very super protective and very close to both of them as a result of that. So, and like I said earlier, I have always been kind of the mother hen of my circle of influence. People know that if they um, want to feel taken care of, they come and hang out. It's like, this is what I do. It's what I love to do. I have become very social. When I was going through all of this in the past, in my first, I would say, 25 years of my life, I was painfully shy, socially awkward, painfully shy. I have gotten a lot better at relationships and have some really incredibly um, wonderful people in my life. My friends are everything to me now. And I so appreciate the healthy relationships. I've let go of all the toxic people in my life, and just created this space where there's positivity You know, I wake up and I'm grateful every morning because, like I said, I didn't think that I would be here. I am now 55 years old, so I'm already 30 years more, older than I thought I was going to ever live. So that's such a gift. Um, I do a lot of volunteer work, especially in the domestic violence arena. I think it's super important to share my story because people don't know, because when you're living in it and you're so scared. And back when I was going through this, the police were not much help, to be honest. I had filed for protective orders because the third and final violent relationship, that person stalked me for 2 years, and he broke into my apartment and he went through my stuff. And I would, even in the relationship, I would call the neighbors would call the police. And you know neither one of us was ever taken out of the home. And I would go down the next day and file a protection order. And it didn't matter. It was like it didn't mean anything. And so I know that things have gotten better now, and I'm so grateful for that. There needs to be a lot more advocacy around domestic violence for sure, but it has improved quite a bit. And I think there's a lot more protection in place for people. I called myself a victim for so many years, and then I changed that language because, um, you know, if you live in the victim mindset, you will always be at a disadvantage, I think. It goes back to not having the voice that you want to have, or not having the confidence, and not feeling like you deserve better or deserve things in your life. And so I stopped calling myself a victim and I started calling myself a survivor. And there's a lot of strength in that. Um, like I said, I still, you know, I speak at shelters now and then. I speak at things like this where I get to share a little bit. I wrote an article. One of the first things I did that was big and scary was I wrote an article for a women's magazine, and my family was like, "Oh my gosh, do you really want to do this? Do you really want to share this? Do you really want people to know?" And, it made me second guess myself. But in the end, I said yes. It's like if I can help one person get out of a relationship that they don't think they can get out of, then it's all worth it, to be able to reach that one person and make a difference. Um, then I don't care about the judgment anymore. I think that I was so afraid of being judged for so many years that I didn't want to share. But at this point, there's something freeing about when you hit that 50, when you hit the 50 mark, it's like you start to care less and less about what other people think about you. And that is very freeing, a lot of freedom in that. So, fast forward, I have been with my partner now for almost 30 years. Um, it's it's been wonderful. He's my best friend, and we started the first business together. That was a whole other, experience, learning how to work with your partner. Um, it is extremely challenging, but even more rewarding if you can figure it out. And I can tell you now, I'm a career transition coach now, right? I'm still in transition. I love to work with people in transition. But and from the very beginning when we started our business together, I really thought we were going to kill each other after the first 3 months because we were stepping on each other's toes and there were no boundaries, and there was, we were taking conversation home that should have been left at the office. And, we lived and breathed what we did. And if we had not brought in a business coach at that 3-month mark, I don't think we would have made it. not in business or in marriage. Um, but that was one of the things that we did. We hired a business coach, and she was with us for probably the first 5 years of our business, and then we moved on to an executive leadership coach at that point because we were building a team. So by the time we sold the company, we had had it almost 15 years. It was very successful. We were able to sell it to a national carrier, and they took all of our employees that wanted to move over. That was super important to us because family was everything to us. Those employees had been with us, the majority of them had been with us the whole time, and they were family to us. So even though it was one of the most difficult things that we had done together, the selling part, that is, we were kind of forced into that due to a medical condition my husband has. But it was a great learning, and I'm very grateful that we did get picked up by somebody that would take our employees because it was so important to us. So we did. We sold that company in California. We came to New Mexico, where I am now. And I actually love the state of New Mexico. The only downfall that we experienced when we got here is the job market. It is a poor state, and we came in coming, from being business owners, and I thought for sure we did take the first year off, and I have to say that was super important for us as a couple because the the events that led up to us having to sell the company, we experienced a ton of loss in the year and a half leading up to that. So we had lost my mother-in-law, we had lost our family dog, and we had lost my best friend to an overdose. And those three things had activated the disease in my husband. And so we were kind of forced into making some really big decisions really quick. And I engaged, a broker that helped us sell our business. And so we ended up in New Mexico. So here, took a year off and really just spent that time grieving and healing. And it was really, really good for our relationship. We had been under so much stress leading up to that. It was the first time in all of the time that we'd been together that I actually thought we might not make it. We may end up in divorce, and that really scared the hell out of me. Um, this is the only long-term relationship that I've had that has been a healthy one. And and like I said, he's my best friend. We were friends 2 years before we even started dating. And so he's been in my life, a really long time. And so to have that time was great. But at the end of that, he was going off on disability and I was going to be looking for a job. And I came in, like I said, as a previous business owner, thinking that this will be a piece of cake, right? Well, no, it was not. It took a lot longer for me to find a job, for one, a lot longer than I anticipated. And I had to, it was a very humbling experience. The job that I took was in healthcare, which never ever had any exposure to healthcare, had no experience in the industry, so I had a lot to learn. I started at $16 an hour, um, and had to prove myself to get to the level that I had asked for when I started. Um, it was it was difficult to learn a new industry. I had been in the other industry for, God, 20 years. So it was more than 20 years. So it was a totally new thing for me. But I learned and I did it. By the time I left that practice, um, he had increased his business, increased his client base, was really on the map in the area as far as the marketing, because I took over all the marketing. I managed the office, I managed the business. It was a really great experience. I was there for 2 years. And as a result of being in that job, one of our clients was able to refer me to a specialist to work on the disease that my husband has. And it was life changing because he's been treated with a medication that's not even FDA approved. He's been receiving the treatments for 5 years now, and it slowed the progression significantly. So he has been able to maintain, um, a regular life. When we got here, we thought he was going to be out on disability. We had signed up for all kinds of resources and specifically chose the house that we're in right now because it was close to medical facilities. So we had pretty much, knew that this chapter was going to look completely different than the one we left in California. However, as a result of me getting that job in healthcare, everything changed again. So talk about transition. I've been through quite a few of them. Um, so that has been the biggest success story, I think, of us, and probably the reason that we ended up here. When it came time for us to look for a new state to live in, because most of you are probably from California or watching this in California. The cost of living was so high there that we knew that if we wanted to live a simpler, easier, less complicated, less expensive life, we needed to leave California, and that's what we did. But when we were trying to figure out where we were going, we looked at the five states that were surrounding California that um, we knew had a lower cost of living threshold. New Mexico was the only one that we had never been to. So we moved here not knowing a soul. Um, we eventually were connected with some people, friends of friends and friends of family, and we started building our network, and really super grateful for the community that kind of wrapped their arms around us. And so that part was great. But if that's the one reason that we ended up in New Mexico was so that I could end up in healthcare, for that, I was in healthcare for 3 years, and that was everything. That changed everything with my husband. So and it's still holding. So I'm very, very grateful for that. Um, but fast forward, because we live in a poor state, I have had 3 jobs in 5 years, and 2 of the companies I worked for went under. So they went completely out of business. And that happens here, because we're in a poor state. So by the time I was hit with that second layoff, I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't do this anymore. For me to have to keep proving myself over and over again and begging somebody to hire me for half of what I was worth, it was so frustrating, super frustrating, because I'd always been a top performer wherever I'd been, and so for me to have to go through that again, I was just like, I can't do this. So a friend, introduced me to a career transition coach that does what I do now, and it was a game changer. She opened my eyes to other opportunities that were out there. I had thought about going back into some kind of self-sufficiency role, some kind of business ownership again. But I knew when we did it the first time that it took a really long time for us to realize our first profit. And we were in a very expensive business. So the investment, it took us quite a while before we actually brought profit in. And I didn't feel like at this stage in my life that I had that kind of time. So I wanted to walk into something structured, something that I could just kind of pick up and take off with. And I found that in the Entrepreneur Source. So the Entrepreneur Source is a franchise. We are a career transition coaching franchise. So this is my business, though, but it came with all the, things that I needed to get up and running a lot quicker. And I'm really, really appreciative of that. So now I get to do, exactly what I did, when I was facing that second layoff. I get to do that with the folks that I connect with through LinkedIn, through networking, through, other resources. I love what I do. I love to help people trying to figure it out. I have been there so many times in my life that I feel not only my life experience helps, but I've also been through this coaching journey myself. I've also done a lot of mentoring, of my own employees, of small business owners in my community. I've been doing that on a volunteer basis or for my own business for years. And so it felt like a good fit for me, to receive the formal training on it, which I did. And I love just taking the time to connect with people. And, we get to dream a little bit, right? We get to start defining some goals. What do you want your life to, what kind of lifestyle do you want to be walking the day in the life in? It's like, do you want to work 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week? Probably not. If you were given the choice, I mean, sure, there are some people that will want to do that, but most of us want some freedom and some flexibility. So what can we look at that would be a better fit to get you, right? So we look at all those things in this business. We look at um, lifestyle, we look at your income. What are you trying to replace? What are you trying to improve? You know, I have worked with C-suite level executives that are making, two, three, $400,000 a year, and they want something to replace that income. Either they were faced with a layoff out of the blue, which some of them have been. It's harder to replace a job like that. The more you make, the less opportunities there are. So we talk about those things, replacing income. We talk about lifestyle, income, wealth and equity. What kind of wealth and equity do you want to build? Do you want to leave something to your kids? What does that look like? So we're doing a lot of goal defining and a lot, and the coaching conversations go pretty deep, because I want to know what the obstacles are, like what's in your way, how can we break through that? A lot of people come to me and they're scared, because they don't know what the next phase of their career needs to look like. So, we'll walk through that journey together and try to figure that out and put you in a better place. By the end of the coaching experience, I want you to have clarity around what you're doing, what it is that you're going to do, whether that be staying in full-time employment or starting a business on your own or looking at a franchise opportunity. It doesn't matter. Like, as long as by the time we're done, what that clarity is, and you're headed down the right path. So there's great reward in that. I've always wanted to make an impact in people's lives. And I feel like I'm finally in the right spot, where I get to do that on a daily basis. And it's super gratifying, for me. Again, going back to gratitude, if you take one thing away from this, be grateful. You're here for a reason. I clearly am here for a reason. I shouldn't be, with all the things that I've been through in my life. There's a reason I'm here, you know, um, and I think it's led me to where I am today. So if there's anybody out there that I can help, figure out what it is that you want to do with your career, if you want to explore some different industries, if you want to, you just want to have a conversation, I'm sure Lisa is providing my information on how to reach me. I will give you my phone number. It's 408 550-5892, or you can email me at jjaciw@esourcecoach.com. I welcome any of you to, make an appointment that we can just have a chat. And I, again, want to thank you for being here. I wish I could be there in person with you. I did contribute a session with me for the raffle. So one of you will be the recipient of that. If you have no anticipation of a career transition, please gift it to somebody else. I'd love to work with a friend or family member that it does need my service. So please feel free to do that. Pay it forward. If you don't need it, pay it forward. Well, I hope this was helpful. I thank you again for allowing me to share my story, and I look forward to connecting with some of you. Thanks again.